Hey everybody, Karaoke here. Heart of Thorns released this past weekend, and hopefully you've been playing a lot. I know I've gotten quite a bit of game time in, although I still feel like I've barely scratched the surface in the game. But if you were to browse, say, Reddit or the official forums, what you'll find is a lot of people who have completely made up their minds that Heart of Thorns is either the greatest thing to ever reach gamers, and is amazing, and everything's wonderful, and there's not a problem with it at all, or that it's terrible and awful, and it's just a big gated grind, and nothing about it is good. And, you know, like gamers often do, we've put ourselves into camps of either everything's perfect and fuck you if you think otherwise, or it's all terrible and ANET's a big sellout and something about NC soft and we gotta find a way to pull Nexon into the conversation, and it's kind of all bullshit. Personally, I just to give my opinion quick, I think it's probably like an 8 out of 10, and there's a few things I think they could fix to make it a 9 out of 10, but what I'm really finding is that the disagreement about the game comes from two different areas: Masteries and the process of unlocking the elite specializations. Now that's kind of leaving out maybe complaints that PvPers might have, but those two things are pretty widely shared across the game as topics of concern. And I might talk about elite specializations later, but for now I wanted to talk about Masteries. Masteries were meant to be a system that as you grow as a character and you play the game more, you progress and become more powerful in ways that aren't just the amount of damage you do, but allow you to grow and expand as a character. And they're also meant to be a long-term goal, and sadly most of the conversation that we're having has been focused on whether the goal is long-term enough or too long-term or anything else, but it's missing some context. So I thought maybe I could come in and being kind of an engineer and a math-minded person, maybe we could talk a little bit about how much experience and, you know, quote-unquote grinding there is in Masteries, and move forward with like some numbers and some context. So my goal here really is to provide context and to provide maybe some quantification of what people are talking about. And to do that, I think we have to take the work required to level Masteries and put it into terms that we understand. And so to do that, I made a little chart for you. So in this chart, every pixel represents 1,000 experience earned. And I want to show a comparison of a few different things in the game. So first off is this little teeny tiny blue dot here. This represents the amount of experience you need to level once you're level 80. So before Heart of Thorns shipped, it used to be you would earn skill points or skill shards or whatever after level 80 as you continued learning experience. And this is how much it took to get a level at level 80. The next one here, this is what it takes to level from 1 to 80. Now I think this is a little bit misleading because experience scales based on your level. So this box in reality feels bigger than it looks. So this should seem a little bit small to you, but this was the actual amount of experience it took to level from 1 to 80. Next up, we have the amount of experience that it takes to level 1 full Maguma Mastery track. This is everything except for the Exalted track, which requires a little bit less. But as you can see, it goes up substantially. This is 13 million experience to level a track. Compare that to the 4.8 it takes to level from 1 to 80, and it's a pretty big growth in the amount of experience needed. This is the equivalent of having to level up almost 3 full characters from 1 to 80. And then as you start to look at all the Maguma Mastery tracks, that box looks even bigger, going up to almost 50 million experience. And then here on the right-hand side is kind of the big one. If we're counting Core Tyria as well as the Maguma Jungle, it is 80.865 million experience to level all of your Mastery tracks. Now, you can see that the box is bigger, but again, a little bit of additional context. This works out to be 318 levels once you're level 80, or the equivalent of leveling up 16.6 characters from 1 to 80. Or my favorite metric, because like those are hard to kind of quantify in my head. The one that I really like here is somebody who ran a lot of dungeons. This is the equivalent of running 454 explorable dungeons. This is before the patch where they've apparently reduced the rewards. I haven't played it yet to see, but that's what I've heard back, is that they've nerfed the amount of experience of explorable dungeon paths. So 454. So even if you were a pretty regular dungeon runner and you ran, 20 paths a day, you're still looking at quite a long time to go and pick all those up. And dungeons were the quickest way to get experience before the patch. So this hopefully gives you a kind of a good way to look and see how much is required to be able to go in and level all of these masteries. Now, the big question that we have here is, does this constitute a grind? And that's a hard one to answer because nobody really agrees on what grinding is. We could go down to dictionary definitions, but I feel like once you have to do that, the argument's just pointless and there's no reason to have it, right? To me, a grind is something that feels like you're forced to do a particular thing to get somewhere that you want. And in this game, I think they've mostly tried to avoid creating grinds for us, and I think they've done a pretty good job of that. But the one area that prior to Heart of Thorns, I think everybody felt the most grindy was getting a legendary, and specifically it was getting the precursor for the legendary. And this is something that ArenaNet agrees with. They've talked about this. They're in full agreement with us here that getting a precursor felt grindy because you just had to save up huge amounts of gold, which yes, you could get by doing any content. You just go out there and do whatever and you're earning gold. But even though you're making constant progress toward that item, the amount felt too high. And specifically, you couldn't really, you couldn't feel your progress as you went along, and it didn't feel like you were doing something legendary. So when they added precursor crafting, they really wanted to go and create a story behind each legendary. So I'm not just running around killing stuff and getting gold, and that gets me a legendary. It's, look, I'm doing all these specific tasks that help me work toward my legendary. And I think that that particular thought or idea is what they should have applied to Masteries. The problem that I have with Masteries is the Masteries, you work on them over time, but it's this big chunk of experience, and while you can feel a little bit of progress, while there's checkpoints along the way that you can see yourself getting closer, you get experience from doing everything, although not equally, and it just feels like a big grind in the same way that legendaries did for gold. I have to keep playing and playing and playing and save up gold to get my precursor. I have to keep playing and playing and playing and save up experience to get my masteries. And I think the difference is that getting your masteries doesn't feel tied to the masteries that you're earning. So let me give you an example of how I might change this. For fractal masteries, if I'm training a fractal mastery, what if I got bonus experience for doing fractals? So as I'm doing a fractal, I'm getting more experience and I'm training my fractal mastery faster than I would otherwise, and it feels intertwined in some way. And this is a simple change, right? Giving bonus experience for doing fractals while you're training a fractal mastery is a relatively easy change. I think there's better ways to do it, but that would be a quick fix. Same thing for any of the Maguma masteries. If you're doing an event related to the new Hawk and you're training new Hawk lore, you should earn experience faster. And so then your choices of which mastery to train are at least somewhat tied to the content you're doing, and not just something that you set and wait until that stupid bar fills up so you can go spend some mastery points. Now, I don't think that ArenaNet should necessarily reduce the amount of experience required to train your masteries. I think the number's okay. I don't know if I would set it quite as high, but there is an argument to be made that at least it feels like a long-term goal and something that you can work toward over time. But it would definitely help if the process of unlocking these masteries felt at least somewhat related to the masteries that you were earning, rather than it just a big experience sink or a time sink that's designed to stretch out your goals. I think the worst offender of all of this are some of the gated elements in the game. Specifically, I think the poison feels the worst to me. So many of the hero points in the game are blocked off, and you can only get them if you have poison mastery, which is, you know, buried in like the 4th level of one of the masteries and requires a pretty substantial experience grind to get. If things like this were removed, and personally for the poison one, I think they should just take it, move it to the 2nd level, and, you know, kind of just get rid of that 4th level, and that would change the feeling of that somewhat. But it's these gatings that really start to feel bad, because then it's, well, this thing that I want to do, in order to do it, I just have to sit around and earn a bunch of experience, and then I can go do it later. And there's no real way to kind of speed up that process. There's no way to say, oh, well, I want to get this fractal mastery faster, so I'll do more fractals. And so it just starts to feel like an incredible grind to many players. Anyway, that's my opinion. I'd love to hear what you guys think. If you think that the experience needed should go down, stay the same, or perhaps even go up, let me know in the comments. Do you think that there should be other ways to earn your masteries faster, or just other ways entirely? Or do you like the idea that it's based on experience that you can earn anywhere? Let me know what you think, and I look forward to the discussion.